Hero Podcast. Igniting both the art and the science of functional medicine. Here's your host, Dr. Brad Watts.
What's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Brad Watts with the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. We've got a special episode for you. Special in that it's just me today. Special in that I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that you can use from a clinical perspective, things to think about, ways of thinking and approaching your weight loss patients today. So I've been out teaching, traveling around the country, and it's been exciting. It's been super fun, actually. I like the process of traveling and teaching. And what I appreciate about it is getting to talk to people that are in the trenches on a daily basis. Otherwise, I just have my experience in the trenches on a daily basis, right? And what happens is I get to develop some camaraderie with people that are serving their communities, that are being nutrition heroes to the people that need it most. And that's the ones that have no choice in their community. They don't know any better. They don't know the questions to ask. They don't know that their body's been designed to heal. They don't know that the edges of a cut heal together, that same power can be transferred to metabolic disease, to neurological disease. Easy for me to say. And it's awesome. I love it. Gives me an opportunity to not only connect with people, but to get their take on things as well. I like having well-rounded opinions, and those opinions, when you travel, those opinions get affected by different people, and it's pretty cool. So I appreciate it. You'll find out a little bit more here later in the podcast about that. So anyway, one of the things I commonly get is Dr. Watts, how do I find out more information about functional medicine or about clinical nutrition? How do I add it into my programming? How do I add it into my practice? And there are only a couple of places that I highly recommend that you get this information from. One, if you just want rote clinical data, if you just want information that gives you the physiology and that's it, there's no better place, right? Right now, there's no better place than FMU, Functional Medicine University. Those guys, Dr. Grisani, those guys have it on lockdown, and it's phenomenal. They do a very good job of getting good guests in there, explaining physiology and mechanistic behavior. They're able to help walk you through ways of assessing patients, and it's cool. So very cool. The other place is this group called FM Shift. They have an event coming up first weekend in April, the 5, 6, 7. And these guys are, bar none, the best at how do you practice, right? How do I practice? They're the best in the marketplace that I have found. And if you know me, it's one of those things where I don't talk or brag on people a lot, but FM Shift is where it's at, man. So all the way from the beginning of how do you accept patients into care to how do you help move them through a care plan successfully. These are the people that you want to talk to. So if you want information about their event coming up in April, it's in Scottsdale, Arizona, April 5, 6, 7. Just email me, brad@biogenetics.com. Get you taken care of there and some information to their website, etc. But again, they're the FM Shift, and they have an amazing setup, easily accessible for people. And if you actually want to do some damage in your community in the right direction, right? If you want to start saving people, if you want to start exposing them to the power of health and healing in their own body, then the FM Shift is where it's at. So anyway, reach out, brad@biogenetics.com. I'll get you connected with those guys, and we'll go from there. All right, also, wanted to make sure that when we talk about functional side of care, when we talk about nutrition, when we talk about organizing how to help patients in an ongoing fashion, want to make sure that you realize that chiropractors, nutritionists, natural health care providers of all types, right? We do not hold the healing. Your patients hold the healing. It's in their body already, and it's about working with that innate intelligence, and it's beautiful when we can come alongside and make it happen with them. And so I just want to highlight that because so oftentimes we take the medical principles of replacing function, downregulating, decreasing, blocking, or inhibiting, and we apply those same principles to nutrition as if the patient is going to get better with that style of care. And it doesn't work that way. One of the reasons why there's such a great track record for people getting better and reversing chronic diseases, chronic conditions in natural healthcare in a functional setting is because of our philosophy. The philosophy is key. We don't hold the health and healing. We just work with, we co-opt with that innate intelligence, and it does such a great job. So, all right. Anyway, I wanted to highlight that before we get into talking about weight loss today, because weight loss is the theme for 2019. All right? Unless you've been living under a rock, you understand that everybody and his brother, January rolls around, we're going to try to lose weight. We're going to get on that New Year's resolution bandwagon, and then obviously everybody falls off 2 weeks later. And here we are in February, the end of February, and people are like just clamoring for the next thing. Okay, so the New Year's resolution has taken its turn, and we're moving on to what's next. And so what I want to talk to you about is what's next. If you're deploying weight loss programming with your patients, I want to give you some things to think about in the process, rather than just prescribing them a diet and telling them, here, have at it, as if fat's the only problem. What I want to do is I want to talk about a little bit more detail on some of the things that your fat is harboring. Fat harboring other chemicals. And so, all right, so if we look at fat cells, adipocytes, as basically as water balloons, one of the things that you're going to find out is with a water balloon, you put more water in it, the bigger it gets. The same thing with a fat cell. You put more adipose in a fat cell, the bigger it gets. Where is that fat coming from is the question. Now, if it's actual fat, then we're looking at calorie balance, and this is where your personal trainer comes into play, and dietitian and all the stuff, and we calculate all the calories in and out, and we just play the game. Right now, if you've been playing the game and your body isn't responding, or your patient's body isn't responding, the question is what else is at play? Are there any other mechanisms at play here? And one of the things that we find out is that it's not just fat inside of adipocytes. And if it's not just fat inside of an adipocyte, what is it? So we have other fat-soluble chemicals that your body is harboring, holding on to, and that's what needs to be addressed here. So if we look at a fat cell, if it's 50% adipose, like 50% adipose tissue, right, and then we have 50% other stuff, in quotations, that we want to figure out, if we're going to lose weight, we can't just get rid of the adipose tissue, because we're going to create a toxicity of the other stuff. What's the other stuff? Sometimes it's actually fat-soluble vitamins. Patients that have been taking their vitamins since 1987, and they don't know what the levels look like in their body. Right? Like, see the European vitamin D crisis in the 1950s. And I don't mean to laugh, but, you know, give public health officials control over what type of vitamins you get, and obviously people are going to end up with toxicities. So, and it's kind of a sad situation, but that's one of the reasons why the medical community is so like interested in controlling how much vitamin D you get, because they still remember the issue in the 50s in Europe. Basically what happened is you put a bunch of vitamin D in little kids' formula and cereal, set it on a shelf, and you don't account for the half-life in the physical body and that the body stores it. And so now you overwhelm people with a bunch of vitamin D because you want to cure rickets, and boom, right? You got a bunch of people that are dealing with vitamin D toxicities, sick, people that are sick, their hair falls out, they don't feel well, they start having kidney issues, liver issues, you name it. And so anyway, one of the things that we find out is that we collect a lot of stuff from a fat-soluble perspective. And the reason is that when we don't put a demand on bile from a detoxification perspective, we don't process these fat-soluble chemicals through phase 1 and 2 liver detoxification mechanisms and then get rid of them. We process them through phase 1 and 2 and then recirculate for them to be stored again. And so bile formation is a key. So if you're going to be talking about weight loss with patients, you must make certain that they are creating bile. And it's so kind of a weird topic to talk about. Not a lot of people are going to be looking at bile salts and bile formation and that type of stuff. But I'm telling you, if you actually want to have impact on your patients, this is key, bile formation. Now, when we look at where does bile come from, it's going to be created in the liver, obviously, but then we have this storage mechanism, like a gallbladder. What if you don't have a gallbladder? You still got to make bile. So what happens when a patient doesn't have a gallbladder is typically the patient is told, you just need to curb the amount of dietary fat you're eating from now on, right? You're not going to digest it. Okay, so this is insane. This is fully insane. And here's why this is fully insane. Is because if you don't put a demand on bile every day now that you can't store it, your body is not going to be creating bile. How are you going to be getting rid of all of these contaminants that we're processing through phase 1 and 2 liver detoxification reactions if you cannot create bile? If you can't create, the reason you're not creating bile is because we're not putting a demand on it. So if you want to lose weight right now, and we're talking about fat-soluble toxicities, if you want to lose weight in this type of an instance, you must make sure that you're putting a demand on bile every day. Right? That means eating fat, having some fiber situation. Super important. Super important. How much? No idea. You got to test your patience. Okay, that's that's going to be my standard answer from that perspective. No idea. Just test your patience. So super important though. All right. So what happens when we don't create bile? When we don't create bile, we don't actually move these fat-soluble toxins into the hepatic portal, and you don't actually get them into the hepatic portal. What am I talking about? In the biliary tree, right? And what happens is we end up pushing them through the hepatic portal back into circulation. That's what I was going to say. And so in this instance, we want to make sure that when you're eating fat, that the patient is actually experiencing or able to see bile in the stool. What does it look like? It's green. It's a pigment. It's green and it's a pigment. Super important. Right? Now, what are some of the reasons why a patient wouldn't create bile? Number one, they don't eat fat. Let's say they do eat fat and they're still not creating bile and it's just creating greasy stools. Right? And in this instance, we want to look at, is bile being created appropriately? One of the key ingredients that are needed for bile formation is phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine. You might have heard on webinars past for biogenetics that I've done, or on podcasts past that I've mentioned or had conversations with people about. Phosphatidylcholine is absolutely required for bile formation. It's probably actually Dr. Chris Shade out of Quicksilver Scientific that we talked about this with. I had him on the podcast maybe last year or the year before that. But anyway, the important part is that when your body does not get enough phosphatidylcholine from a dietary perspective, remember phosphatidylcholine is essentially that lipid layer that your cells are made out of, okay, 1/2 of that lipid bilayer. When we don't get enough of this stuff, your body does not cease to make it. What happens is your liver, hepatocytes, will basically sacrifice themselves in order to create bile, the fluidity portion of bile, and that's really where the PC is coming from, is from cell wall of hepatocytes, right? So when your liver says, hey, PC is so important that I'm willing to donate my own cells so that we can create some fluidity with the bile here and actually get rid of these toxins, you know that it's pretty important, all right? So here's the second tip for you, is make sure your patients are using phosphatidylcholine. It's so important, right? So important. You got like 30 to 40% of the population dealing with fatty liver disease right now, and most of them don't even know it. That liver is not going to be inclined to donate itself consistently and to any beneficial level. Your liver is not going to donate itself to just donate phosphatidylcholine in the long run. It'll do it in times of stress, like when it's absolutely necessary, but your body would rather be overweight than without a liver. I'm just telling you, right? The innate intelligence that runs your central nervous system would rather be overweight and alive than with half a liver and toxically dead. And this is important. This is so important. So not only do you have to put a demand on bile every day by eating dietary fat, you got to be able to create bile by having phosphatidylcholine in the diet. Those two things right there, I mean, right there alone, gonna solve some cases for some people here, okay? Super important, super important. Now, when we look at pushing weight loss in the right direction for patients, you can't just let them eat as many calories as they want, especially if they're eating a ketogenic diet. You can't just let them eat like no calories. We're going to be in a huge problem with that also, right? There has to be calorie balance, Right? So if we got 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, right, what we're looking at is creating deficits. Now, it does not mean that you create a 3,500 calorie deficit every single day and they'll lose a pound. It's not how it works, right? Your body has checks and balances that regulate inflammation, water balance, electrolyte balance, all right? And these things have to be accounted for along the way, which is why if you have a tiny effort consistently is much better than a drastic change right away in the beginning. Like there's this guy on the internet right now, it makes me laugh, very intriguing, right? But he has I won't say who it is, but he's got this modified fast where you mix a bunch of stuff in water and just let it ride. And his videos are enthralling because he's a character, right? And the stuff works that he's talking about. But basically what you're doing is you're getting into this process with the body, right? You're getting into this process with the body where it begins to rest and digest and heal, and you actually have some cell turnover. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And while you don't want to live that way, it is important to make sure that you have some level of autophagy, which is what this process is called. You want to make sure that you have some level of autophagy taking place. Now, one of the things that I like with autophagy is that basically what it is the body starts to self-digest, and it's a cellular cleanup mechanism. And what it is innate intelligence in action. It's that power inside the body that heals the edges of a cut together, doing the housekeeping, right? Not just in forms of trauma or sickness and disease, but also it does the housekeeping, and that's the beauty of it. So autophagy is this process, and if you can get patients in autophagy, they will, if their body needs to lose weight, they will begin to lose weight because it allows them to detox and clean up these cellular inflammatory mechanisms that are present. One of the biggest causes of these cellular inflammatory mechanisms is chronic exposure to high levels of food energy, and that just means a high level of caloric intake. And so it's toxic on the cell membrane when it's overwhelming. Now, I'm not saying to fast forever, but I am saying that syncopated or modified fasting can be helpful for your patients in 12 to 24-hour bursts, right? Maybe once a week, maybe once every other week. Like if they just pick a Tuesday to let their body get into autophagy, awesome. Obviously, if they have extenuating medical circumstances, you probably want to make sure that you don't let them do that. However, the point is that if they're healthy otherwise and they want to lose weight, modified fasting can be of some value. So we got 3 points here. These 3 things are things to think about that are not going to be built into these cookie cutter programs that you find for New Year's resolutions. Okay? Now the other thing to think about is if your patients couldn't stick with the New Year's resolution in order to make it work, because most of those things actually do work, by the way, if your patients have any level of self-control or any level of autonomy in self-directed study, most programs work, right? Diet and exercise, it usually works. Now, if it's not, apply some of these tips and tricks that I was talking about today, but also realize that your patients need some accountability. Okay? So here's the difference between accountability and responsibility. Responsibility for weight loss is the body's homeostasis mechanism. Accountability is your patient being willing to work with it. Like if you have 6 donuts every day, you're not being accountable to the mechanism in your body that's going to return it to homeostasis. That's a simple fact. Now, the same thing is true in coaching your patients, is making sure that you understand you're not responsible for their end result, but you are accountable to coaching them, right, with the laws that this innate intelligence is designed to work with, and it's super cool. And so I throw that out there because it's going to help somebody understand, take some of the pressure off, right? Take a deep breath, let your patients be accountable to the power in the body that heals the edges of a cut together, and move in the right direction. And it is a beautiful relationship when it works well. When we try to be smarter than the body and trick it and do all these other things, we end up just destroying our relationship with that innate intelligence. We destroy our relationship with innate intelligence. And that's really the sad part. That really is the sad part in this process. So, anyway, When we talk about weight loss in an ongoing basis with your patients, they have to maintain a quality relationship with innate intelligence in order for them to heal. This means that they cannot live on stimulants. If they live on stimulants, what happens is their body becomes resistant to those stimulants. Think about what the mechanism of action is of a stimulant. So let's talk about caffeine for a second. I am a fan of caffeine. I've used caffeine on and off for decades, all right, in my own life. I'm a fan. I like it. Tastes good too in the different forms. And what happens is we end up using caffeine as a crutch for quality lifestyle choices, right? So one of the things that takes place is caffeine creates this this stimulant effect on a cell membrane, and we start pumping out mass amounts of ATP. With that ATP, if your body doesn't have very good detoxification mechanisms from an antioxidant perspective, we end up creating a lot of reactive oxygen species. And if ATP production outweighs your ability to clean up reactive oxygen species production, your patient's going to shut down and they get tired. It's almost like an insulin-resistant feeling. Like if you have a patient that eats a bunch of pasta, right, they're a diabetic patient, they eat a bunch of pasta and they're like, I'm just so tired, doctor, after I eat. It's the same feeling that you get when you use stimulants for weight loss in the long run. Patient goes to the gym, they start working out, and they just gotta go sit down and they just want to take a nap. And it's overwhelming. It's crazy, right? So as their heart rate goes up, they get this abnormal fatigue. Not like I'm tired, my muscles hurt, this is invigorating, it's awesome, but like I just want to die. I just want to lay down. I just leave me alone. Let me close my eyes. And this is something to watch for. So number 4, all right, key number 4 here is to make sure that you're using strong enough antioxidant support if your patients are trying to lose weight from an exercise-based protocol. You have to have the antioxidants present in order to make that happen. So I like CoQ10, I like resveratrol, that's great, I like glutathione, those are all good. Okay, I like alpha-lipoic acid, R-lipoic acid, this stuff is fun, it works well. And it's just about making sure that you pair the right one with your patients. Run some organic acid testing, figure out what their levels are like, and give them what they need. It's not hard, it just takes a doctor that's being accountable to their patient's physiology. So, and it's really cool. So anyway, those are 4 tips, quick tips. This can be a quick podcast here, just like 20 minutes or so for you. And I wanted to throw that out. Any questions, please let me know, brad@biogenetics.com. And we'll get you taken care of from that perspective. Thank you again, you guys, for your support with the functional programming that we have here, the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Thank you for being nutrition heroes in your community. You don't get enough love for that. You just don't. That's the fact. The fact is you don't get enough love for it. And so I'm going to give you some love for that. So thank you for serving your community. Thank you for taking these messages of natural health and healing and dropping it in your community and letting it affect people, changing their lives. It's pretty awesome. So keep up the good work. We'll see you back with the next episode of the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Got a chef coming up next, 20-time author. I'm excited. I'm not going to tell you who she is, but we're going to get to it. And that should be probably coming out this next week or so. And yeah, all right, carry on, people.